Today we're covering the top 5 best rogue decks for the March 2024 competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format. What's Potion? You got Matt here and welcome back to another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video. We all know that right now we're in a very heavy fire-based format that is arguably a tier 0 format at that. But we're seeing a lot of other decks compete in the format today, even though they aren't going to be part of the meta. So today I wanted to talk about the 5 best rogue decks of the format, decks that may not be able to compete consistently with Snake Eyes and Snake Eye Fire King, but are still having a good amount of success at the regional and YCS levels. So if you're excited for the video, then make sure to smash the like button. If this video hits 250 likes, then I'll bring you a tier list for the top 25 or so best rogue decks in the game. Also, if you like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, including deck profiles, guides on how to beat the best decks of the format, meta discussions, and videos just like this one, you're gonna love this channel, so make sure to subscribe. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers and we can't get there without your help. But with that being said, here are the top 5 best rogue decks for the March 2024 competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format. Let's jump into it. So obviously everyone's definition of what actually is a rogue deck and what is a meta deck, for example, differs from person to person. So what I wanted to do is give you the decks that I felt were actually going to be the meta decks this format, the decks that are going to be higher up on the tier list. And if you guys disagree, then let me know down in the comments below. But for the time being, these decks are not going to be considered to be in the rogue deck tier. These decks are going to be Snake Eye Fire King, Voiceless Voice, Fluondereeze, Branded and its different variants, Kashtira, and Rescue Ace. Based off of their representation and success over the last few weeks, these 7 decks will not be considered as part of this video and therefore are not rogue decks. There also isn't going to be any quantifiable data that I'm talking about when looking at each of these specific decks. In general, the way I determined which ones are going to be on this list are going to be based off of how well they perform against the top decks, as well as their representation and their success levels over the past few weekends of regionals and YCSs. And if you disagree with any of the decks on my list or the reasoning for those decks, then let me know down in the comments below and we'll have a discussion about it. So with that being said, let's jump into our number 5 best rogue deck. It's going to be Spright and its variants. Spright is a fantastic deck in this format because it can put up a ton of negation and can really play through a lot of different end boards because a lot of their effects don't actually activate. The effect to summon out Blue or Jet or Carrot or whatever don't activate at all, which is great so you can get these bodies on the field to get powerful link summoning effects as well, like IP Masquerena and of course SP Little Knights. One of the best hand traps in this format right now is Nibiru, which is seeing a lot of play in the main deck because of how good it is against so many different strategies, and when paired with another hand trap it's even better. But we're also starting to see Bistils in the side deck as well, which are decent against Spright because they do have a couple of dark monsters, but once you resolve the effect of Gigantic Spright, then they can't actually activate the effect of their Bistils to summon themselves, or Nibiru even, so your plays are protected. Spright still has that old school mentality of being able to put up a ton of negates on their turn 1. A lot of Yu-Gi-Oh right now is less so about putting up negation and more so about putting up recurring interaction that is going to be annoying and recursive to deal with, so having access to Spright and all their negates can be really good. And the deck is also able to play through a bunch of different hand traps right now as well because there are so many starters in the strategy. There are still the classic lines of summoning out Blue and getting Jet and then getting Starter to get Red and then getting into Gigantic, for example, and starting your plays that way, but we've also seen a pretty heavy shift towards the Nimble package as being one of the better options to pair with Spright. Because of the Nimble package, you can pretty easily get 2 level 2 beasts on the field, which allows you to get access to Melfi the Forest, which in turn, on your opponent's turn will get you a negate, but it'll also get you access to Herald of the Arclight on your side of the field too for an Omni negate and a Walking Macrocosmos as well. The deck obviously has a weakness to big monsters and to mass board wipes and negation. Cards like Forbidden Droplet and Dark Ruler No More are pretty tough to deal with this strategy. But the good news is a lot of these strategies now, a lot of these Spright strategies rather, are playing a lot more hand traps. They're able to play at least 15 to 18 different non-engine pieces, which is really good to be able to combat the format today. And one of the more common hand traps to see play in Spright variants today is actually going to be Dimension Shifter, which is insane because in this format specifically, because Snake Eyes and Snake Eye Fire King are so dominant of decks and they're really weak to Dimension Shifter, having access to Shifter in this deck gives it a leg up on its competition, and for that reason and all the combo potential the deck has, it definitely belongs in the top 5 rogue decks this format. Our number 4 best rogue deck of the format is actually going to be Labrynth. Yeah, Labrynth, which has a really bad matchup into Snake Eye and Snake Eye Fire King, is actually performing very well in this past few weekends at regional events. Specifically, it's come in first place at 2 different regionals, and it's also come in top 4 and top 8 multiple different times. The thing with Labrynth though is that we're starting to see it being played with multiple different builds. We're seeing a blind going second variant with a ton of different hand traps, but also incorporating Absolute King Backjack and of course the Rescue Ace cards as well to create a very powerful engine. We're still seeing very classic furniture builds with 10 to 12 spots for trap cards, and we're even seeing a lot more decks now that have access to 20 some odd different trap cards in their main deck, which is a lot considering the way that Labrynth has been playing the past couple of months. And we're even seeing variants of Unchained Labrynth pop up as well and performing decently well at events too. While the deck does have a really hard time dealing with the different fire decks in the format, we're seeing a lot more tech cards being played to counter those strategies. Cards like Destructive Daruma Karmic Cannon, and even cards like the Black Goat Last and Different Dimension Ground are seeing a lot of play to be able to counter these specific decks. We're also seeing a slight drop in the amount of decks playing Cosmic Cyclone in their side deck. Cyclone is a fantastic card against Labrynth especially, and of course against different Floodgate cards, but the reason why it's so good against Labrynth is because a lot of the time when a Labrynth player decides to activate a normal trap card, you can chain the effect of Cosmic Cyclone to make sure that the Lady Labrynth won't actually be able to summon out, or set rather, another trap card from the deck. With Cyclone seeing less play, and of course with Transaction Rollback being in the format and all these very powerful trap cards that are really good against these fire strategies, it's starting to come up a bit more often and having a bit more success. And even though Labrynth is still pretty weak to cards like Bell and Ash Blossom on the Big Welcome and Welcome respectively, because of these secondary engines the decks are playing, they're still able to put up a lot of interruption regardless of using their Welcome spells and traps. This doesn't change the fact that if you're playing Labrynth, you're going to have a really hard time against decks like Snake Eye and Snake Eye Fire King because the matchup is just inherently pretty bad. But if you use these Silver Bullet trap cards that are going to be really good against those matchups, you can have a pretty good time against them if you play optimally, and of course if you're able to get your engine and resource game online. But if you're not playing against a deck like Snake Eye or Snake Eye Fire King, you're going to have a pretty good time with Labrynth. And part of the reason why is because before the release of Phantom Nightmare, all these fire decks here were still very good, but Labrynth was poised to be the best deck of that short-lived format because of the release of Transaction Rollback and all the powerful cards that were in the Labrynth strategy. Now obviously that didn't really come into fruition, but Labrynth still has a great matchup against a lot of different decks this format outside of the fire decks. Our number 3 best rogue deck of the format is actually a deck that is near and dear to my heart, and that's going to be Bestial Dragonlink. Surprisingly, Bestial Dragonlink, which has a great matchup against light and dark based decks, is seeing a lot of play in this format and having a decent amount of success as well, topping multiple different regional events. While the Bestial package has shrunken quite a bit because there are so few different light and dark monsters in the format today, they can still easily hit cards like Linkuriboh and of course Diabellstar, which are great options to play in the fire strategies. If a Dragonlink player goes uninterrupted, their end board can be one of the scariest in the entire game, including really powerful cards like Hieratic Seal of Heavenly Spheres, Barone the Floor, Bestial Dispatter, Boral and the Dragon for example, and even something like Branded Regained, and of course Boot Sector Launch, which are two of the most powerful recovery tools in the game today. Dragonlink can play through a lot of interruptions and cards that would aim to stop their first turn. Cards like Nibiru just aren't that impactful anymore because if you have Hieratic Seal up already on the field, then you can extend past it. On top of that, if you have access to something like Infinite Impermanence or Effectula or Ash Blossom, a lot of the time it just won't do enough work to really get the job done against a Dragonlink player. But there is one hand trap that has a really good time against this deck, and that's going to be Droll and Lockbird. But thankfully for Dragonlink players, Droll and Lockbird have started to see a lot less play in the main deck, which means it's going to be a side deck staple for the time being. In my opinion, it's not a coincidence that as Droll and Lockbird have started to see less play in the main deck, that Dragonlink has become a better deck overall. But there is one thing about the deck that really annoys me, and that's the fact that most of the time if you want to play Dragonlink and you want to play an appropriate number of hand traps and non-engine cards, you're going to have to play 45 to 50 cards in your strategy, which is not always going to be the right decision. While I think Dragonlink can't compete in this format, it requires a really skilled pilot because it is one of the more complex decks of the format today. And of course, knowing which end board pieces you want to end on is a really big skill that you have to know, and what cards you want to side in a given matchup is also important, especially in a deck that has more than 40 cards. Moving on to our number 2 best rogue deck of the format today, it's going to be Mannadium. Now listen, a lot of people when I made my top 5 best meta decks were disappointed that Mannadium wasn't on the list, and at the time, sure, maybe had an argument, but since then we've seen a much steeper decline in Mannadium's playability and success rate compared to what it was originally anticipated to be. Mannadium is still a very good combo deck this format with a ton of powerful starters in the strategy and of course non-engine pieces as well. But the problem with Mannadium right now is most of the time we're seeing a lot of board breakers as their non-engine compared to hand traps, which are more common and better in this given format. A lot of popular cards that you're going to see in a Mannadium strategy include Enemy Controller, Forbidden Droplet, and Triple Tactics Talents. Now while Talents is great and Droplet is seeing an increase in popularity, they're nowhere near as good as other cards like Ash, Imperm, Valor, Nibiru, etc. The good news is that Mannadium is not that impacted by too many different hand traps. Really, it's hurt pretty heavily by something like Droll and Lockbird, but something like Nibiru doesn't really work on them because they can easily get to Barone before their 5th summon. On top of that, a lot of hand traps like Ash Blossom or Imperm aren't going to be as impactful because they can just combo through them and get to still a really scary endboard nonetheless. A lot of the time, these endboard pieces include cards like Barone de Floor, a copy of Bestial Dispatter, maybe even a Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity if they decide to go with that line. They'll also possibly be able to have a copy of Abyss Dweller on their side of the field if they really feel that's necessary, and of course Mannadium reframing as well, the counter trap. I did consider both putting Mannadium higher on this list and also lower on this list for a few different reasons. One of the reasons why I wanted to put Mannadium lower on this list was because as a deck itself, it's seen less success over the past few weekends than a deck like Dragonlink has, which is funny to think of because right now a lot of people will consider Dragonlink to be the worst deck overall. But its representation was a good deal higher from what I'd seen. On the other hand, I put it higher than Dragonlink and was considering putting it at my number 1 spot. But the reason for that is going to be because of its non-engine specifically. The deck can play hand traps and board breakers, but the board breakers it can play set up its engine very well and help them play through interruption like Imperm and Veiler. But some of the non-engine that Mannadium has access engine pieces as well. The same goes for Dragonlink. Dragonlink has access to the bestial monsters which start their engine but are also able to be powerful interruption pieces as non-engine cards against light and dark based matchups, especially against cards like Diabellstar, Linkuriboh, and of course IP Masquerena. On the other hand though, you have Mannadium, which has Kashtira Fenrir. Fenrir though is a great starter for this strategy because you can search out for cards like Scareclaw Kashtira to get the engine going. On top of that though, as a non-engine piece, Fenrir is just a better card right now than bestials are in the format today. Ultimately, I decided to put Mannadium higher than Dragonlink and at the number 2 spot on the list for a few different reasons. The first is going to be at how good the engine is at putting up a lot of very powerful negation tools in this format. It's also really good at getting the counter trap, which is very hard for a lot of decks to interact with. I also really like how the non-engine itself pairs with the engine requirements the deck has. Kashtira Fenrir being a searcher is great, of course Forbidden Droplet and enemy controller being able to dodge targeted effect negation is great too, so there's so many different things that pair well with this strategy, even though they don't play as many hand traps in the format today. And the last reason is because I believe that Mannadium has actually a higher potential to top and do well over the course of this fire format than Dragonlink does in the long run. So while it's very close between these two decks, I'm giving the slight edge to Mannadium as the number 2 best rogue deck of this format. Before we move on to our number 1 best rogue deck, I want to talk about 2 other different decks this format that I believe deserve some special recognition. Now these 2 decks are by no means going to be the 6th and 7th best rogue decks of the format, that's not at all what this is. I just want to shout them out because I felt that right now they had a pretty good shot at topping different regional level events. The first of which is going to be Salamangreat, which has a really good, consistent, and concise engine that can play a lot of different hand traps as well. And we've already established that hand traps are so good this format that a deck that can play 15 to 20 of them is going to have a lot of success. And the second deck is actually going to be Vanquished Soul. I think Vanquished Soul has a lot of potential as a deck this format because they can play a ton of hand traps. The deck itself doesn't have the most amount of consistency, which does suck, but as a strategy itself, it does work very well with all these different hand traps in the format, including Dimension Shifter, which we've established as being the best hand trap at stopping the Snake Eyes and Snake Eye Fire King's deck, but not every deck can actually play it. Vanquished Soul can do that, and they gain extra advantage off of it because it just so happens to be a dark monster for the Vanquished Soul monster effects. But let me know down in the comments what other rogue decks that I've missed. If you guys comment them down below, I'll have more ideas for what rogue decks I should talk about when I do my rogue deck tier list. But now, without further ado, our number 1 best rogue deck for the March 2024 competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format is going to be Raidraptor. Raidraptor is a fantastic option that I almost considered actually putting in the meta decks tier. But considering that right now the deck itself doesn't have the most amount of success and most amount of representation as well, it becomes a little bit more challenging. The deck is extremely complicated to pilot effectively, and knowing which lines are the most important and valuable is tough to do. The deck also has a lot of really powerful extenders and combo enablers that allow it to play multiple different lines, so for that reason, knowing the deck inside and out is extremely important. The deck's main gimmick is that they can put up a ton of really powerful Towers-esque monsters, cards like Rising Rebellion Falcon and of course Ultimate Falcon as well. Most of the time, having 2 or even 3 of these cards on the field at the same time is going to win you the game against your opponent. The deck does have a few weaknesses, the most notable one being cards that would tribute over opponent's monsters, like for example Kaijus, Lava Golem, and Sphere Mode. The good news is, those cards aren't really seeing any play right now, so Raidraptor can kind of run free. The deck is also pretty weak to different hand traps as well, but you have to pair them with other hand traps as well. Just one Nibiru or one Imperm or one Veiler or Ash Blossom does nothing against this strategy. The deck can play through Joel and Lockbird and put up really powerful combos as well. And because of a card like Raider's Wing, which protects a card from targeting, this deck itself can play around cards like Infinite Impermanence and Effect Veiler, which is really important to note because this specific deck itself has a really hard time dealing with those cards on one specific card, being the Raider's Knight. The deck is able to recycle its resources fairly well thanks to Raidraptor Roost, and of course able to put up an Omni Negate as well thanks to Raidraptor Glorious Bright. The deck itself is pretty weak to a card like Dimension Shifter, but for that reason, a lot of these decks have decided to shift to playing a copy of Bagooska in their extra deck as well. A lot of the decks right now that are playing Dimension Shifter really hate dealing with Bagooska right now. Obviously Snake Eye and Snake Eye Fire King don't care too much about it, but they're not going to be playing Shifter anyways, so Raidraptor can just go full combo on them most of the time. Raidraptor has an incredibly high ceiling, a very good turn 1 combo, and can break boards going second very easily as well and force out a lot of interaction. It's for that reason that I believe that Raidraptor is the best rogue deck of the format and can definitely compete against some of the best meta decks in the game as well. And that's going to wrap it up for today's video, but before you go, make sure to let me know down in the comments below what your favorite rogue deck is and if I missed any rogue decks on this specific list. And leave a like on the video as well if you haven't already. Not only does it help the channel grow, but it also lets me know that you enjoy this type of content as well. Make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers and we can't get there without your help. And if you're planning on building any of these decks, check out my TCG Player affiliate link for when you're buying your cards. It's in the description as well as a link to my Twitter and my Discord server, which you should definitely follow and join too. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.